How to have free Christmas decorations is one of my favorite things. And the great thing about this is not only is it free, but it also smells really wonderful in the house. So you have the natural fragrance of a Christmas tree, even if you have a fake Christmas tree and some extra decorations. So this is cedar. Of course, you can use any type of evergreen branches that you like. I happen to like the cedar because they're a little bit drapey, and they also have some of the little pine cones on there, so I don't have to add anything for decoration. Now, depending on if you are doing a wreath, which we're going to be doing some wreaths today, or if you're just wanting to get some extra boughs to put in a floral arrangement, for the wreath making, you want to make sure that you get some decently large pieces so that they can curl around. But if they're too large like this gets a little bit hard, and then you've got, this is so long that it's a lot of material and it's kind of hard to make your wreath from them like this. So I like to come out and pick some of these smaller branches that aren't quite as large yet. They're still supple enough that I can move them around and there's enough greenery, but I just think that they're a little bit easier to manipulate when you're making your wreath. So a pair of pruning shears is going to be very helpful. So as I said, I really like to do the cedar. Now there's lots of different evergreen types, and of course wherever you live you're going to have different varieties that are more native. Hemlock is really pretty because it looks lacy, but I have found that the hemlocks, once you cut, and especially if you're going to do any of these wreaths or arrangements indoors, they drop their needles really fast and they dry out a lot faster. So I don't use the hemlock on any type of arrangement that I'm going to be doing indoors, and I usually don't even grab them for the outdoor wreaths because they're on the door that everybody uses and I don't want them traipsing in all of the hemlock needles as they fall off. Another good option is of course going to be fir, especially if you've got like some of the silver tipped firs are really pretty. We actually have had a big windstorm. And so even though this is not a branch that I'm obviously going to be able to really bend into a wreath, I like to get a little bit different types of needles because I just think it's visually interesting. So if you've got some blowdown like I do here, I'm going to come in and kind of find some of these areas that are a little bit more full. And I'm just going to cut these off. And then I can just put these in small parts on the wreath and have the cedar as the main backdrop. So I'm going to gather a few of these. Now, if you happen to have a holly tree, of course, holly is a very beautiful. You've got the red berries, you've got those deep green pointy leaves. They look really pretty, but I don't happen to have a holly tree. But I do have some other bushes that have some very pretty red berries, and they've got the brown twigs that make some nice visual interest. So we're gonna go and gather some of those too. The other really nice thing about getting these berries off of these bushes is this is right alongside my driveway, and I hadn't gotten around to pruning these yet so we don't scratch the vehicles with them. So I'm kind of killing two birds with one stone here. All right, let's go inside and start the wreath making. So in addition to all of our lovely evergreen boughs, having a wreath form is gonna help. And then some of the green floral wire and a pair of wire cutters. Now I will confess, in the past I have used scissors when I couldn't find the wire cutters and I was determined to do it all right then and there, but it does really dull your scissors, so a pair of wire cutters I highly recommend. So when I'm first getting ready, I kind of like to separate out the piles after I've gotten them. And with these berries, just a heads up, I only usually end up doing the berries on wreaths that I'm putting outdoors, not ones I'm hanging up indoors, because as the berries, little twigs here have cut, the berries do tend to start to drop off after a period of time. Like I lost one there, but they will begin to kind of drop off. And they last a lot longer when they're outdoors rather than in the house. But I'm going to set those aside, and then kind of the same thing. These smaller ones here of the pine. Actually fir, not pine. Move those. Okay, and then I kind of like to look through here and kind of pick the ones that have a lot of natural curve to do as my bottom base layer first. This one has quite a bit of natural curve, and so does this one. And I kind of pick the largest ones, which these ones I think are about the biggest. And those are the ones that I set out first to use. So we're gonna get this ready and we're gonna anchor our wire here to the wreath. So I just kind of do a couple of twists like that. And then I do a couple of wraps just to get it anchored really well on there before I bring in my first piece. So like I said, this piece right here has a lot of natural curl to it, so it's going to be really easy to just wrap around this form. And I like to just do several wraps just to get it anchored on there pretty well. And then I just kind of come down to the next point in between there and wrap it. And then here, I'm gonna have to start bending it just a little bit more, kind of forcing it onto the form. Alrighty, now just gonna wrap that around a couple of times to anchor that, and then I'm gonna cut this and go on my next piece. There's lots of ways that you can do this. I just use whatever works easiest and best for the branches that I have. And I'll just finish that off. Then I'm gonna come and kind of do the same thing. We're just gonna stagger it. So I'm just gonna come down like a few inches. That's actually probably about 4 inches or so from where I put the first branch. So we've got a lot of this overlapping and can build a really pretty green base. And again, I'm gonna just anchor this piece in first. And then wrap that around a few times, get it in nice and tight. Now you can also, if you don't want to cut the wire each time you're wrapping a branch, you can start layering. So I've got one here, we've went about 4 inches, and now I'm about another 4 inches. And then you can start just layering it in all the way around, laying these on. So it gets to be a little bit bigger and you have to hold more things in place. And I know they have like wreath presses and a whole bunch of things like that, but I only make these once a year at Christmas. And so I prefer just to reuse the same wreath form over and over and over. And oftentimes once I'm disassembling these after Christmas, I'll just leave the wire attached to the wreath form, and I just keep reusing the same wire and wreath form year after year. So now I've got three branches going, 2 here on the same piece of wire. And so as you get down towards the bottom of here, we're gonna have to start pulling these onto the form a little bit more. There we go. That's why I said I like to look for branches that are supple enough that you can bend them and that already have a little bit of a curvature to them to put on the bottom pieces here. And then after I've got all of this base here, I kind of will just take a lot of these boughs and then just do a little bit with the wire to kind of bring them in. So you can keep going as much as you want. So you can kind of, sometimes I'll kind of just like pick it up and take a look at it and see if I feel like that's a good base on the bottom. And I've got all of my form is covered, and then I'm gonna come in with some of the other pieces and fill this out. So I feel like this is a pretty good base. So I'm gonna go ahead and just do a couple of tight wraps here. So we're going to bring that back around. So here you definitely have some options. So if you were going to tie like a large bow on here, then you could even just leave this as is, put your bow on here, and you're ready to go. But you definitely can still build and fill this out, especially if there is some spots where maybe you see a little bit of the wire coming through, or you feel like it's a little bit bare, you want it to be a little bit more even. So I'm gonna come in here and play with some of these ones just because it adds a little bit different texture. And I've already got all of the wire going through here. So instead of using more and more wire, what I usually will do is I will kind of just push this through where I've already got some wire. It's already nice and tight, and just kind of thread it in there. And I can even push it between the boughs underneath along with the wire and get that in there. Alrighty, so here, you see we just added another layer. Just put these pines in. Now, like I said, if you want, you can wire and anchor these down a little bit better, but I found on our door that's a little bit covered on the door that we use as our entrance to the house. It's fine if I don't have these all tightened down. I haven't lost any of them yet. And then if we want to add in some fun pieces here, let's see. Now these ones, because they're the twigs, right? They don't have all of the needles. These ones are more smooth, and I find that these will fall out easier. So I have to make sure I get them in at a really good spot. So this, you could either hang it this way and have these congregated on the side here, or you could pretend it was nature's bow and you could do it up like this. You also could put these all the way around if you like it to be a little bit more symmetrical and even all the way around. Totally up to you. Now, aside from obviously the wire and the wreath form, this was totally free in order to do this wreath. And because I'm going to use the form over and over, and usually I use the wire over and over too, I feel like it's a super inexpensive way, because goodness, you can get those wreaths and they can be anywhere from like $30 to $40 at the store. And you can also, if you don't have your own woods, then you can definitely ask some neighbors. You don't really use very much of the branches at all. As you can see, that you could hardly see that I took anything off of the tree. And then oftentimes Christmas tree lots will need to trim off bottom branches of the trees, and so you can always go and ask them if they've got any extra, or you could use some if you're trimming them off the bottom of your own tree. But definitely would ask a landowner. Don't just go taking tree branches from people's trees without asking. So now let's go get this hung up on the door. So now it's time to hang our wreath. And if you feel like some of the pieces are coming out, one of the things I like to make sure is that they're not going to get caught in the door when we're opening and closing it. So if you've got a piece like this that you're like, oh, you can just kind of tuck it under there. And then I'll actually put it just like that. There we go. We've got our cedar wreath, and that took really maybe about 15 minutes to put together, which is pretty fast. And the great thing is when you hang them outside, especially where we live in the Pacific Northwest, where we're pretty cool and really wet, is this will last for months. I have had wreaths that I've put up in November and made, and I haven't taken them down till February, and they were still green. Now, if you live in an area that's really warm, or maybe it's really dry, for the boughs and stuff, you can come out and mist it, and that will help prolong it too. But when it's outside this time of year, it will last for a pretty decent amount of time. And now we can make a great centerpiece, or wherever you want to put it. I'm going to put mine on my table with our leftover boughs that we have. So you want to make sure that you fill it with water if you're going to have it indoors, just like if you were doing a live Christmas tree, even though obviously this has been cut. So I just kind of, first I put them in here just to see if I need to trim any off, if they're going to be too big. So just kind of set them in there and see. Like this one I might take down just a little bit, take a little bit off and see how that goes. And then this is one of my longer pieces, so it should still reach into the water. And And these won't last very long, but they do add a little pop of color, so I'm gonna still throw them in there. And now we have a gorgeous piece for the table. And if you keep refilling this with water and checking the water level, this will last and stay nice and green for several weeks. And it brings a beautiful smell of Christmas with the fresh evergreens into the house. Now, if you want more ideas for gift giving, make sure that you check out the video that I did on the best gifts to give and receive, as well as the gift giving guide on the blog.